This one is a 12-mark question, so we're looking at between 10 and 15 minutes here. So let's have a little look at this one. It says here, study source B and A, right? B and A. They're going to be the only sources, I think, in the source booklet. So how useful are source B and A to a historian studying the opinions in the West about the Hungarian uprising? So how useful are source B and A to a historian studying the opinions in the West about the Hungarian uprising? Now I know, right, that I need to talk about PAC. Provenance, got to analyse provenance, got to analyse the content, we've got to bring in our contextual knowledge. So, I know it's 2 paragraphs, that's the process I've got to go through. So let's have a little look here at the sources. Right, now we haven't got a great deal of time to be reading through these, so let's just go through it straight away. So a cartoon by Michael Cummings, published in November 1956, right? I know that's at the time of the Hungarian uprising, 1956, the November. The British, so a cartoon by Michael Cummings, published in November 1956. It's a British news chronicle, so it's a British opinion. Cummings targets were usually left-wing, such as trade unionists or students. The cartoon shows a man representing Hungary, and so I'm just going to write, this is Hungary, yep. Man representing Hungary, yep. Soviet soldier with an album on his helmet. He walks away. The UNO stands for the United Nations Organization, another name for the UN. Well, yeah, okay, that's the UN, and clearly it's a wreath. Hungary is meant to be dead, right? So just think about what I've taken from that. I haven't analysed it. Right, let's have a little look at source B. So source B, written for Time magazine by a left-wing American journalist. Right, so we've now got an American opinion, 10th of December 1956, so pretty much this is after now the Hungarian uprising. Was briefly given responsibility for promoting the idea of the UN, so that might influence his opinion here. He was promoting the UN. In the final weeks of the Roosevelt presidency, he was investigated by the FBI as a suspected communist, but no real evidence was found. Oh well, look, that might come into play. Let's see what he had to say then. So we do not speak of a Hungarian revolution. We speak of Hungarian agony. From the moment when the communist regime in Budapest fired upon an unarmed crowd and turned its quarrel with the Hungarian people from a political quarrel which it could not win into an armed revolt with Soviet aid, it could not lose. The suppression of the Hungarian resistance was inevitable. The world seemed to feel it had no choice short of atomic war, but to sit back and watch in horror and disgust the brutal, methodical destruction. He's clearly against what the communists have done here, the brutal, methodical destruction of an angry people by overwhelming force and conscienceless treachery. Right, well, clearly he's against. So, what's my question? Let's just remind myself. Right, study source B and A. How useful a source B to a historian studying the opinions in the West? Right, well, I think they both think the Hungarian people have been treated unfairly. So let's put this to one side. So, right, exam script. Right, we've got to follow provenance, analyse, bring in me knowledge. So, source, right, source A and B are both useful to a historian studying the opinions in the West, about the Hungarian uprising. Right, provenance point, source A. Why is it useful? So, source A is a British cartoon. So, source A is a British cartoon published during the uprising. Right, what's he called? Cummings. Right, Cummings is critical of communism and shows the USSR as a military brute murdering Hungary. Right, there's my provenance point. I need to go into content now. Source A suggests. Look at it again. So source A suggests the UN was ineffective and could do nothing to intervene. Right, I've got to bring in some knowledge. I know I have, but we're still on content. So, the Soviet soldier represents the 200,000 soldiers sent to crush the uprising in November 1956. There's some knowledge. The Soviets do act violently. This is about the UN. So the Soviets do act violently, and the issue was raised in the Security Council. Of the UN. Full stop. However, the USSR vetoed any further action. This is still knowledge, right? The General Assembly, the General Assembly condemned the brutal Soviet response, but had no power to intervene. The cartoonist, just think about the content, the cartoonist has represented this through the wreath being placed on Hungary. Right, that's sufficient for A. So let's go into source B. Is also useful, but obviously this is now an American response. So, right, source B is useful. Right, source B is useful as it gives an American perspective, again I'm talking about provenance here, of the uprising. Now I'm thinking to myself, well, the Americans don't get involved in this, do they? So source B is useful. It gives an American perspective of the uprising. The journalist, now the benefits of this, we're just going to write on the plain paper. The journalist, but you'll have proper lines in the exam, the journalist describes the horrors of the uprising, or the horrors of what happened. And is critical of the USSR's actions. Full stop. Content now. It describes, or he describes, probably would have been better. He describes the USSR's actions as treacherous. Full stop. The source could be seen as more sympathetic towards the difficult choice faced by the international community. Full stop. And if we look back here, he's talking about the journal. He points out this difficult choice about here. Right, this is what I'm talking about, this bit here. So, face the international community. The journalist points, let's write, the journalist points out that the world felt they could not intervene without nuclear war. Right, so in reality, the Security Council could not overrule the USSR's veto. And I've got to bring in some knowledge here about America, the American perspective. Right, the USA made no official comment during the uprising. Full stop. American involvement was not an option, as Hungary fell within the Soviet sphere of influence. Full stop. Interfering would be seen as a direct attack on Soviet security. Right, and if you had time, which I don't think we probably would do, but if we did have time, you'd write just a very quick judgment. Both sources, right, are useful as they show that both America and Britain condemned the actions by the USSR. Full stop.